Oh, there's Lee. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of SEO Fight Club. I am currently just setting things up and saying hello on the YouTube side. So if you are watching on YouTube, we will be looking for questions there. So be sure to go ahead and ask, and we'll be watching. So today we have a bit of a different kind of show. There's not like a lesson or a big, reveal. We're going to be looking at the SEO Volatility Software again. And this time we're going to look at a new feature that lets us animate the results. And so it's pretty cool. We can see some very specific Google behaviors regarding the volatility of rankings. And so that's pretty exciting to me because these are, behaviors and concepts that historically have been theoretical and for practical purposes have been very difficult to kind of demonstrate and prove. And so now we have a new tool set that kind of makes short work of that. And so it's kind of like being a kid in a candy store. So that's kind of what we're doing. Let me go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, here comes Clint. Going through the boilerplate, there's a couple shows I like to promote, and Clint's show isn't back yet, and we'll let you know when that happens, but he has to create a new website and build some stuff out before he brings his show back. So we're all eagerly waiting that to happen, but there's no ETA on that. So until SEO this week comes back, you can check out the SEO video show by Dre DeVera. It's an interview show where he interviews all the big personalities in SEO. So to find it, just go to YouTube, search it by name. And then Carolyn, what's going on with your podcast?
Well, I'm fleshing out a topic, but I think this week's topic is going to be SEO as a sport. And I'm just going to leave it there.
Interesting. Yeah, it is very competitive. It's kind of a treacherous landscape with all the changes Google makes. And then you're not the only one making big moves. You have 99 other competitors in the top 100 who all want the top rankings. So it is kind of like a gladiator scenario almost. So if you want to check out that podcast, it comes out on Fridays. You can search for it by name in Google. It'll be the top result, Confessions of an SEO. So we have a number of normal events at IMG. So we have the Brand Cert Masterclass, which is new. We have Matt Diggity's course from the library. We have our standard Friday featured member and our YouTube show roundup on Mondays. And next Tuesday, we have an Ask the Expert Live with Kyle Roof. So if you're missing out on your Kyle Roof time, that's a good place to go get it. And that'll bring us back to SEO Fight Club. So again, our topic today is animating volatility. So with that, let me hide this browser. And so what we have here, are you guys able to see my screen? Can I get a
yeah, I can see it.
Excellent. Just wanted to make sure that was technically working. So what you're seeing here is the volatility software that we use to check the volatility in the rankings. And so this is version 1.3, which isn't available yet. So if you're currently using this software, I'm hoping to get this out in the next few days. I got a couple more tickets to do before I can release it. But this has a new feature, and that feature is that if you set up an output folder for a keyword you plan to run a lot, once you get enough reports in there to suit your needs, you can use this Animate Folder button, which will then create another HTML file that will animate all the reports. So for example, what that looks like, let's look at video games. So I have this folder, and here's video games, and it creates these frames out of the reports and gives you an animate.html. So when I double click that, let me scale it. So what we get then is it'll animate through the reports, and we can see the changes as a function of time, which is really kind of cool. There's a couple basic buttons in it, and that we can pause it. I can change the delay between the frames. So if I make it 50 milliseconds and say play, it'll be super fast. So you can set the frame rate in milliseconds, and then you can resume. You can also step through if you're looking for a specific frame in the sequence, and they're just ordered by timestamp. And so you can run any configuration. So if you wanted to do frames at 10 samples or at 3 samples, you can do whatever you want in that regard. But that's the idea, is that you create a set of frames over time, and that way you can kind of look at how the volatility can fluctuate as a function of time. And so today we're going to make one, and then we're going to view some pre-made examples. So let me go ahead and pause this. And Lee, do you have a keyword that you want me to run? And
Let's go with best SEO software. It's an oldie but a goodie.
All right, so let me choose a folder for it, and I go up to the animation level. So best SEO software.
That is correct.
Okay, and we'll say open. So I've changed my output folder to be that folder. And is there a top ranking website we should do? Maybe like SEMrush or something?
Yeah, that'll work.
What's that?
We could pick another one. There is this one guy I know.
Well, I want it to rank high enough that we can use it as an example.
Let me check
Fair
for
enough.
one for you. Let's check for one for you. Do everyone's favorite. Moz is there.
Moz.com.
Moz.com. SEMrush isn't in there on the top 10. So.
Okay, so with that, we come back here. I'm just going to do, for the sake of example time, I'm just going to do 5, and we'll do multiple.
Need to change the keyword?
Oh, yeah.
None of them.
There we go. Run.
Should have let you do it and then said it. Slacking on my trolling.
That is true. You've become kinder and gentler recently.
Yeah, I got out and got to see people for a while, so
Took the edge off. I'm not sure what to think about the new Clint.
All right, so we got one report there. Let's run it again. So I'm just illustrating how this feature works. And so it's just a simple example to show how these were created. So each time we run it, it's going to run the search to whatever sample count we set. And it'll put those into HTML files.
That's weird.
Oh, it was too quick. I'll have to create a ticket for that.
I can't wait until this is out and all the major bugs are done, because I'm going to add some link building with techniques with this software to my Cora training.
I'm going to backdate the file name by a minute. So I got a new bug ticket to do on this. If your reports finish in under a minute, the file name doesn't change and it overwrites. But normally we run at much higher sample counts and that doesn't happen.
So what I hear you saying is just being in Clint's presence broke the tool.
Yes, his aura still applies.
It's true, because I am the guy that would be sitting there just mashing the button. But in my case, I would have done it like 10 or 15 times, then went in there and looked and been like, what the
What happened to all my reports?
exactly. Ted, your software sucks.
All right, so we have 3 of them in here. That's good enough to show how it works. So now I go back to settings and I say Animate Folder, and it remembers the last folder we used, which is the one we're using. So I say Open, and we get frame 1, 2, and 3 from our reports, and we get this animate.html. Let me zoom out on this. And so now it'll just cycle those reports that we created, and we can see the volatility over time. So there's not a whole lot. What's interesting is these two, rows 3 and 4, they get between 0.2 and average rank. So they sometimes behave like a minute random variance zone. AKA when Google has a tie in scoring, you get a little bit of random score and you randomly shift as a result, a fair tie breaking condition. And so we call those MRV zones. And they're very interesting to us because if you're in an MRV zone, we theorize that even tiny amounts of SEO could break the tie. So you could very, very easily remove that volatility and get the better of the 2 spots. And sometimes these zones can be 3 and 4 URLs in a tie group. In testing, we can see all of our test cases being in a tie group when we properly eliminate all of the variables from our test pages. You can just hit search on the test keyword and watch your test pages randomly shuffle. And it's because they all are too close and score. And you'll see different MRV zones around the results. So down here at the bottom, there's another one. And they will shift back and forth. And so it happens wherever there are roughly tie scores within the search results. So you can see, 1 zone, you can see no zones, you can see 4 or 5 zones. The further down you get in the results, the more tricky it becomes to spot those MRV zones, because you tend to encounter more time sharing, and you tend to encounter more tie groupings, and it gets harder and harder to make sense of it. And because of that, it gets harder and harder to definitively know why things are moving. So it gets trickier the further down the results you go. And when you animate, it's still the full report. So if you pause and want to look at cannibalization or title variants or things of that nature, you still can. And so we still have the full report here. So that's the basics of how that new feature works. What do you think of the UI on that, Clint?
I like it. It's pretty easy.
Awesome. All right, so let's look at some other examples. So I'm going to look at these. I ran these earlier today. So this one is for gift baskets.
Is there an HTML code to automatically fix that? To do
What,
that?
to scale it?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably can. There's way to use the viewport scaling to automatically do it. There's
Okay. I'll see if I
Yeah.
can figure it out, and then I'll send that to you so you don't have to worry about it.
yeah. So it's just another detail that needs to be figured out.
You said viewport scaling.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it. You can also scale within CSS3. I think it's a transformation in CSS3. So there's a number of ways of doing it. So one thing I like to do is I kind of like to look at what's going on. So here the keyword is gift baskets, English in the US, and these downward testing ones that are huge, they're very stable. So if we pause and look at these, we have Zingerman's is the first one and Forbes is the second one. When we step, they're shifting down. So now we have Forbes down here and Zingerman's down here, but that downward testing moves with them. So wherever they jump around, they're taking that horrible downward testing with them. And we often see that the downward testing in this tool is fairly consistent. So for the most part, it tends to be reliably there. Likewise, with the time sharing, it's also another fairly reliable metric that seems to like pop up frequently if it's there at all. And what I've found so far is that the downward position testing is about 70% reliable, the following month to quarter as to where that website is going to go in terms of its most common ranking. So seeing stuff like this is very disconcerting. Another thing I notice is that this time sharing. So what time sharing is Google will take a page that doesn't really belong at a certain ranking, but it'll try it out there. So this page here in the fourth spot, which is Hickory Farms, it has 5% time sharing. So 1 in 20 searches, it shows up as number 4, but it hasn't really earned its position. If it earned its position, it would get good representation every time that search is viewed. But since it's not getting that, we're fairly confident that Google is just experimenting or testing out this page. What's also interesting about it is we can see it came in at number 4. We know it happened on the first result in this case because the first result of the one below it got pushed to number 5. So this downward position testing here is a false reading because it was created by Google's test inserted right above it. So you get interesting anomalies there, which might be the reason why the downward position testing is only 70% predictive, because we probably get a lot of these false cases that are getting into the data, and we have to get better at ruling those out. But when we look down here, we see, here's a Google test, here's a Google test, another one, another one, another one, another one. This much, testing of things in the search results across SEO tools is going to corrupt a lot of correlations. So this is a very big problem. If I step backwards, we see that the testing changes quite a bit. And so one of the big things that we're finding in SEO this year is that when you use a weighting, so you weight by the average ranking as well as by the time sharing, you can tune these tests, these experiments lower in the results. You can tune them, you can weight them appropriately. And when you push those experiments down to where they perform instead of where they sometimes rank, then you get much stronger correlations. A lot more things correlate and at a much higher signal. So, Lee, what do you think about these experiments that are being thrown into the search results?
I think they offer us an opportunity to sort of analyze and see if we can figure out what type of pages that Google is interested in testing, and why this page can be tested at number 4 and that page gets tested at number 24. I think there's a lot that we can learn from this now that we have this tool and can take a look at data sets with this, as opposed to just having flawed correlations because some of the data is inaccurate largely in here.
Yeah, I agree. So let's look at some other ones. We'll see some different situations. So let me go back here. All right, this one, Kong dog toys for small dogs. Okay, so right now you're seeing the track domain feature. So I told the software to track good housekeeping. So we're following it as it moves around. And we see some time sharing experiments, not as many entering into it. And so let me pause this.
The interesting thing is you can watch as those little experiments come up, you can watch good housekeeping move down.
Yep. And you can see it in these early ones. So again, it happened first here on the first request. So the first request on the subsequent ones got bumped lower. And so we see that all the way down, and it keeps going. So we get this artificial downward testing in these. And so we still have to get better at tuning out the effect of, negating this experiment and the data below it. So we still have a ways to go on dialing things out, but at least as an initial foray into tuning out Google's volatility, just weighting by average rank and the time sharing seems to work wonders, but we can probably even improve upon that yet still. And so, yeah, that's an interesting dynamic. And here on this time frame, so I went a few minutes ahead. So here it's still an experiment, but it didn't happen on the first request. It happened out here on the 9th request. And so we see it pushed out on the 9th request. This one was missing, so it probably wasn't present on the 9. So I have to modify this software to use what's we're calling X notation, so that it says whenever a URL didn't appear in search, there'll be an X in the data, so we know where that happens. And we currently do that X notation in Cora, because we're putting these features into Cora so that we can tune out the volatility. And the current version of Cora actually does that and has the X notation. But I don't have X notation in this software yet. It's on my to-do list. And yeah, here's a YouTube one, YouTube experiment. Then eBay rolled an experiment. All right, let's look at another one. Let's look at, I'm going to skip this one for now, look at Miami. We'll come back to the low cost shipping one.
All right, so Ted, while you're animating this, if I'm, sitting at home and I'm like, okay, I'm trying to rank for Miami SEO in this particular case, what am I looking at here that I should care about?
Well, for one, whenever you see that there are just results that are dialed in, they're always at 100% and they're often not fluctuating at all. Those are really solid rankings. So when you see that on your website, you should feel good. Right off the bat on this one, you'll notice number 2 and number 4 are sometimes switching in the sample data. So they're not changing their average ranking, but they do sometimes swap places in the data. And so you'll see that every few requests as this loops, that it's number 2 and number 4. So if I'm predominantly in the number 2 spot, seeing that I'm predominantly in the number 4 spot and seeing that I'm occasionally in the number 2 spot, that's really interesting to me. That means that I must be kind of close to them in rank score for that to sometimes happen. So maybe just a little more SEO will push that over the edge, get me above 3 and perhaps even above, into that number 2 spot. So if I'm number 4 looking at this animation, this gives me hope that I'm close to moving up to, top 3 or top 2.
Cool. Let's say my site's the yellow one because it looks like I've got some work to do.
Yeah, what I like about the yellow one is that it's fairly consistently being tested into the number 17 spot. So that's a good sign. I like to see that. And I like to see that there's fairly consistent downward testing above me. So that kind of gives me hope that I should be able to do, a moderate amount of SEO and make at least those small jumps. So I like that. The thing that I don't like is that, there's no signs, there's no big signs of weakness here. It's all moderately strong. But, the cool thing is, I'm testing upwards and the people above me are testing downwards. That's kind of what you hope for.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing that I'm jumping around, though, is interesting. I would probably want to look at what I'm doing that might be causing volatility. So looking at my data, 19, 17, 17, 19, the thing I'd probably want to make sure is that I'm actively tuning for, making sure there's no cannibalization and tuning the title and the description to try to make sure that I'm not doing something that might be causing that volatility. I don't see anything offhand here. Let's see, we're 100% 19 there. 60. There we go. That one wasn't as good. Yeah, so I don't see a lot of reason for the volatility yet. So my guess is the volatility we're seeing is probably related to volatility that's occurring above or below us. So I would probably have to take a closer look at what's happening with the websites around us to see if their volatility is shifting them up or down, causing our volatility. Sometimes you'll find that you rank fairly stably, but it might be that, you know, the result below you is sometimes going above you because of things like cannibalization or title and description variance. And these variances are when Google is split testing one or more titles or descriptions. Let's see if anything else popped out to me.
That does look
So-
like it's fairly stable above the yellow one, you know, so it's like not, there's no obvious, here's things to give me hope.
Yeah, I mean, there's a tie condition here in the 13 to 14 spot. But you know what I see here is that there's at least a little downward testing above me, and so I think at least on a short jump it looks like, you know, it's doable. We should be able to do some SEO, get above these next couple. So that looks like a relatively short order thing. The data kind of favors it. And the fact that we're moving around somewhat means we're somewhat closely scored. So if we look at this 561 media and our tracked site are going back and forth. So it looks like we're in an MRV zone right there. And so with that, we could probably eliminate the volatility that we're seeing just by doing a bit of on-page, trying to bulk up our ranking score just a little bit to break this tie that's causing us to flip back and forth with 561 media. And so the fact that it's the same website we're going back and forth with is kind of telling. When we look at the average ranks, you know, I saw them at 18.2 and 18.4. So it's within 0.2, 0.3 in average rank. And that's what I tend to see as being like where ties tend to happen. And when we look at this MRV zone here at the 13.5 area, it's within 0.2, 0.4, 0.3. So again, these ones are also in that range where it looks like it's just being randomly shifted because it's a scoring tie. And so looking at that up-down volatility, it looks like we're in a tie condition with 561 media. So even a tiny amount of SEO might stabilize our ranking.
Right.
All right, let's look at another one. Seo Rank Tracker. Okay, so for this one, Moz is time sharing. They are massively time sharing for this. Pretty reliably time sharing. Now, the website I'm tracking is very reliably downward testing. So that's not a good sign when that downward testing is reliable. We do see experiments, and it looks like, largely Moz is the experiment. So Google, views it as a contender, but not so much that it gets solid representation in every search. Let's see, what else do we see here? If I was number 2, I'd be feeling very good, seeing that Google is testing number 1 downward and testing us upwards. So that's pretty close. And we do see some shifting in there too. So it sometimes swaps. So this might be a closer race than either of these two websites realize. And so just seeing that happen, I would be compelled to act to try to break that tie. And if I was SEM Rush here, seeing that I'm reliably being tested downward to 5, I'd also want to move. It's probably because Ahrefs is trying to work their way up.
I'm curious, Clint, when you've played with this tool for a while, when you see some of the volatility, have you seen any in your own pages, and sort of, what sort of effort is necessary to bump them up a little?
It's not significant. It's not like 7 to 14, that kind of stuff, but 7 to 8, those kind of bounces is what I'm really seeing. But I've been too busy worried about the link building aspects of this tool and what I could do with that and what I can create with these, that I haven't actually gotten to implementing a lot of on-page and testing things out.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I suspect that there are probably 2 key areas to trying to address these behaviors and values. One of which is going to be your relevancy, so your on-page tuning. And so when I see time sharing like this, I instantly suspect that there's a relevancy problem with the page and this keyword. Like Google really likes the domain and the page is almost a contender. Maybe it has other, very strong ranking pages, but it's just not quite making the cut. The other thing I wonder about with the position testing upwards and downwards is how important traffic is and the user signals, because Google is tracking the click-through rates. And if you test better, at an 11 instead of an 8, maybe Google's going to say, why not move them to 11? They actually perform better there. So if you're blindly throwing click-through rate at the search results, and Google is testing a spread to see where you should go, you might end up, clicking yourself lower if you're not careful. And we haven't fully tested, how this all works in Google. So, it's entirely possible that if you click on downward position testing, that might have negative effects on you. So sterling silver amethyst bracelet. So what I like about this one is the tracked URL is Blue Nile, and it's just solid. It's not moving. It's dialed in. I think that page 1 for this keyword is pretty tough. There's a little bit of position testing around 4 or 5. But other than that, it looks like Google is pretty locked into its picks. So I think this is going to be a tough keyword. You're really going to claw and fight your way to the top on this one. But it's good, when you see your website behaving like Blue Nile is here, where it's 100% of searches, 100% of the time at its best case ranking. That's a solid number 10. The only way you improve upon that is you get upward position testing to 9 and above. So, this is an indication of a good solid ranking. Whereas this, time sharing one down here that's 5-10%, the Sam's Club, that's a weak ranking. That's a terrible ranking. So, it's only a few spots different, but that time sharing quality makes, Sam's Club's ranking horrible and Blue Nile's ranking is really solid. And so, even though it's only a few spots away, there is a quality to the ranking, and time sharing is generally very low quality. If you could imagine, if you're time sharing at 10%, you're appearing in 1 out of every 10 searches. So Blue Nile or Sam's Club here is at number 13 at 10% time sharing. So, you're missing out of 90% of that number 13 traffic. So if you solve the time sharing, but don't even move to a different position, you get to 100% of number 13. I mean, that's basically a 10x on that number 13 traffic. So you can improve the organic traffic to a page by fixing time sharing, as much as 10 times, a 10x in that organic traffic, without even changing the rank position. It can go from number 13 to number 13 and get 10 times better. And so most SEOs don't realize that there is a quality to a ranking. Is it a strong ranking? Is it a weak ranking? But if you don't do sampling and you don't account for volatility, you don't know when your ranking is strong or weak, or when your ranking was lucky or unlucky or average. It's difficult to tell those things. And that's why when you use a standard rank tracker and you go and tell your boss that you're ranking at number 8, your boss goes and searches the keyword and says, you're a terrible SEO, we're ranking 16, you're fired. It's because you're not accounting for the fact that your rankings are a probability. And if you would have said that, hey, we're ranking number 8 60% of the time, that sets the expectation that they may need to search multiple times to see it. And so we got to get our mindset out of, this page is a number 4, when there's really more to it than just that one instantaneous ranking.
So is this animation now included as part of your volatility tool?
Yes, it is in the software. So when you create multiple reports, so we have 4 reports here, I could use the Animate Folder button on this folder to create the animation HTML. And so in version 1.3, right now everybody has 1.2. When 1.3 comes out, you'll have this button and you'll be able to make these.
And what's the URL to get the tool again?
SEOvolatility.com.
Cool.
All right, let's look at another one. All right, let's go back and look at low-cost shipping supplies. Okay, so I'm tracking Office Depot here, and there's some testing going above them. This is an e-commerce shopping intent, so low-cost shipping supplies. And I like looking at it just because it's familiar to me in the e-com space. I see a tie condition here where it's 7.2, 7.4, 7.5. So some of the time it's within 0.2, and that's probably why we're seeing it randomly slip back and forth. And so we see another tie condition block happening there. And then our track domain, it's also in another tie condition. So saw it 15.0 to 15.2 gets within that range. They flip flop. And it's interesting, it's tying with a Google experiment, which is odd. But the fact that it's, scoring so closely with an experiment leads me to believe that a little bit of SEO could possibly get us in front of that Google experiment. So we could stabilize our rankings by getting that time sharing one below us. And then let's go take a look. These are sometimes interesting if they're stable, but this one doesn't look like it's going to be very stable. And so sometimes I just like to look at the cannibalization. Don't see much there. And the variance. Yeah, not a lot there. What's kind of neat here is the amount of variant keywords. So we did low cost shipping supplies. So the more long tail your keywords get, the more variation keywords Google tends to figure out, the more opportunity for synonyms, the more opportunity for, various types of intent to be added in. So these, and occasionally you see brands pop in there. And I had somebody mention that they had a keyword where their client's brand was showing up as a variation. We don't know a lot about the implications of that yet, but it's really interesting when we see that happen. And I suspect it has to do with the fact that somehow that brand has become topically relevant to the target keyword. We've seen it in keywords for things like that rank tracker one. If we close this, go back to the SEO rank tracker. Let's view like frame 4 here. We see like cognitive SEO has achieved this state. So I think this is a very positive sign if your brand can be highlighted as a relevant match for your target keyword. I think that's a desirable effect. I'm not entirely sure how you achieve that and what the implications of doing it are. But those websites tend to do fairly well. Let's see where they're here. Yeah, I'm not seeing them here. So it's interesting that they managed to get into the keyword, but they're not ranking the page. Yeah, here they are. That's much lower than I would have thought it would have been. So we don't have all the answers, but that brands and the variations, it's an interesting one. We don't fully understand why Google is shaking these up and why rank tracker without a space is only relevant 5% of the time. That's a mystery to us. And then finally, the last example is an oddball. I decided to do a BERT example. So what are some tips for boxing matches for shipping? So we're talking about taking matches, those fire starters, and boxing them for shipping because they're flammable and you got to do special things with them. And so trying to figure it out, we see Staples and how to ship and UPS, but then we see, the Fighter Store and, the boxing dictionary and tips for your first fight. And so it's really commingled intent. And so I just find it interesting to see what's going on here. And so we're tracking the USPS for it and a fairly stable ranking with some downward testing, and seeing FedEx time sharing right above. If I was part of the USPS, I'd be really annoyed by that FedEx timeshare right above us. But then, right below it's bodybuilding. So I'm starting to find like weird, odd edge cases where intent gets kind of messed up, and trying to look at what Google's doing in these cases, looking for clues as to, how things get tested and what gets picked. And so I think this is an interesting concept. And while I don't have a lot to show here, it's interesting that we can target these types of edge cases. And when we look at different things, let's see. So for this one, all right, so we're looking in cannibalization. The most egregious cannibalization is coming out of books.google.com. Their system, for whatever reason, is designed for maximum possible cannibalization. So when I scroll this, you'll see all the different book URLs that are cannibalizing each other. And we don't know why Google built this system for like maximum cannibalization, but they have.
Well, maybe it's just a massive tie condition. All of these books have similar, keywords, keyword density, and so it's a massive timeshare.
Yeah, but it's just crazy. Like if you're using books.google.com for, getting traffic out of a ranking, that's, I don't know, that seems sketchy. Maybe if you're using it for backlinking or something, it makes more sense. But that type of time sharing is just, you don't see that anywhere else. It's only books.google.com that does egregious time sharing. And I have no idea why. I don't understand it. Another thing I've seen lately is that the big swings in rank position, they've kind of been tuned out of the title and description variants. You occasionally see it still, but it's quite rare. But where you see the big swings in rank position tends to be when your website has cannibalization. So, for example, this one has, a spot at 33 and a spot at 75. You see those massive cannibalization swings typically, when you're fighting your own website with multiple pages. And typically one of those pages will rank very well. Like in this case, a number 13 is competing with a number 21. And so obviously, you want 13 over 21. It's a much better ranked position. So this is a case for FedEx. And yeah, we'd want to find out, what's causing that cannibalization, probably two different pages that are targeting the same keywords. And we'd probably want to, tune one down or tune it for something else. But when we look at the description variants here, they tend to be a lot closer. This one isn't, so that's kind of an oddball one. But for the most part, they tend to be a lot closer than we've seen before. We used to see a much wider spread on average with the description and title variants. And down here, with the commingled intent between boxing and shipping, we got one heck of a variations list. It's kind of all over the place. So it's all about fighting and freight delivery and just it's just crazy. Postage, schedule.
Seems like a tight theme.
Yeah. So it's interesting how things can get messed up by that intent. And so if you confuse intent for a keyword, that could have implications on your ranking and your volatility and what percentage of the traffic wants the thing you offer versus the alternate thing that they could be after. It divides the opportunity.
Have you played around with some of the some other terms that are require disambiguation, like if the keyword was turtle, there are a lot of different meanings around that particular term. Does it spit out a fairly large variant list on those as well?
I haven't done enough research into this aspect, but it's like another way we can use this tool is kind of dissecting intent and looking at what happens with these various volatility behaviors. And so we could run the list and potentially classify these and watch as the allocation of boxing versus shipping goes up and down over time. Like that's something that's technically doable.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be interesting to see when those intents like change and how do they change, and did they change after a big core update or did they stay the same? So we're learning to look at updates and kind of the randomness we see in search in different ways, and it could be telling. It could even be predictive, like if we see changes in how intent is handled, that might signal that an update is underway. There's always those possibilities. And then there's still more to learn, like why the hell is books.google.com like built to force cannibalization on a keyword? Like I can't even imagine the business case for this. So yeah, there's so much we don't know, and I've never seen this type of information before. And so really we're kind of a kid in a candy store effect. We're just overwhelmed by everything that we're seeing and learning for the first time. But that's all I have for today. I know we're at the hour mark. Let's see a question. Is this one of the Cora add-on tools? No, it's a separate tool. It has a separate monthly fee. It's available at seovolatility.com. And some of the features, however, so if you're on a budget and you already have Cora, don't feel too pressured to get this. We are taking the notion of sampling and tuning out the volatility. That's already in Cora 6.6. So you're going to get the most important aspects of what we're learning already in Cora. So if you upgrade to version 6.6, it's a much stronger tool because we tune out all these experiments. We weight them by the time sharing as well as the average rank over a number of samples. and you end up getting much stronger recommendations out of Quora. It's amazing to see the difference. And so with that, Clint, you have a conference coming up. You want to tell everyone about it?
It's SEO Rockstars. It'll be I don't have the dates offhand. It's in November at the Tropicana in Vegas. Dory just released her itinerary for the entire conference, so that's up on SEO Rockstars .us, I believe, is the URL for that.
Very cool. So if you want to check that out, check it out. It's a historic conference. It's made a lot of big name SEOs, including myself and Kyle Roof and Clint and a lot of famous SEOs have cut their teeth at that conference. So it's well known and well respected. All right. Any final notes? Anything you'd want to wrap up? Lee, before we go, how's your course doing?
The training's well. We're closing it down here in a day or so because of the NFG conference. There's been a lot of last minute interest. So rather than closing it down tonight at midnight, I'm extending it for a day or so and letting people have an opportunity to set up time to talk with me and apply. So it's going well right now. I'm happy with the numbers where they are.
All right. And what type of people are you allowing into the course? Because I know you're not allowing everyone.
Yeah, it's basically the training is for intermediate to advanced SEOs. I want to see people that are making their money full time. SEO is not a hobby, or they're not struggling with it. The better the people are coming in, the more they'll be able to take what I'm showing and apply it to their situation. So it's definitely not newbie friendly.
And do they have to be familiar with Quora? Is it a very Quora-centric course?
Yes, we use Quora a lot. You do not have to be a Quora expert, though. We'll show you how to, use it. The basic SEO knowledge base that they have will be good for the way that we use Quora. But if you are a user of Quora, you'll get some really cool ideas and some better ways of using it.
Awesome. And how can they contact you if they're interested?
Just ping me on Skype. My Skype ID is testedall.
There you go. Well, thank you everyone for another great episode.